Hey, you're listening to Blindsight. Let's go. Mental health isn't something to take lightly. It's time to fight. It's time to thrive. Let's do this.
Welcome to Blindsight. This is Bill Lundgren with co-host Jonathan Price. And we're going to continue talking about anxiety, about how we deal with it, how we frame it to our best advantage, rather than being a negative component of our lives. And we'll get some of the things that we will talk about. We'll also cover depression and how we can respond to depression. But anyway, Jonathan, how are you?
I'm alive. I'm good. As of recording this, the day that we're recording this, today is my daughter's birthday, so we're excited, and she's 12. I can't even, Bill. Like, I just keep trying to push her head down so that she won't grow anymore, and then the further I push her head and her shoulders down, she just springs back up and gets taller. So I think it's having the opposite effect. But then Landon's birthday is coming up, and they're right back to back. So
they
my wallet
are.
feels my wallet feels a little lighter these days.
Yeah, well, after you get over Saturday, then you can forget about it for another year.
Oh my gosh, I know. I'm going to have to save up even doubly for next year because we have 13.
Absolutely. So big party, you're renting a hall, and thousands of your friends are going to be there, right?
If I had thousands of friends, then yes. But right now, for my close personal friends, it's a very intimate, wonderful little tea party setting.
Oh, good. Okay.
There we go.
All righty. Well, as I said, I wanted to talk about anxiety, starting really the clinical term for most anxiety falls in what they call generalized anxiety disorder, which is, if it's a disorder, it means it's a problem. And one of the things we need to keep in mind that anxiety really can be very helpful to us, just as it kept the human species going in cave person days when there were man-eating predators around. Anxiety is something that can be useful to make sure or help us to avoid getting into trouble. It's just that sometimes anxiety gets so overwhelming that it's a problem in and of itself, and that's what we need to manage.
It's that fight or flight response that's kept us safe.
Exactly. And actually, fight and flight is not really an option a lot of times. And we have to figure out in this today's world, and we have to say, okay, now wait a minute. And one of the things we talked about in the last segment is kind of talking to your anxiety, and that really makes a lot of sense. And saying, looking at anxiety as a friend rather than a foe. But it depends on the degree of control the anxiety has over our psyche and our body, really, because one of the symptoms of anxiety is a stomach problem, a stomach and, tightening of the muscles. And one of the things I really encourage people to do is periodically do a body check. That is to check your entire body, see where there's tightness. Because if there's a lot of tightness, that might be the anxiety speaking. Yeah. And so you can do one of the standard ways of dealing with that is to tighten those muscles even more. And then when it's as tight as it can be, then to slowly release it, and you'll find the anxiety goes out, the muscles relax, and then you're a little more relaxed. That's the ideal situation. But it is a matter, mind-body, to pay attention to the body as well as the mind. And one of the treatments for anxiety, I believe, and one that I'm very grateful for, is regular exercise.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because that's going to calm your body down. It's going to take care of those tight muscles, and it's also going to, get that energy out. And
Yeah.
it's hard to be after you're exhausted from exercising. It's kind of hard to feel that much anxiety.
Yes, it is.
And so, being able to take care of yourself, and also the exercise is good to help you sleep, but the rule of thumb is not to exercise 2 hours before you try to go to bed, because that'll just make it difficult for you to sleep. But the exercise and the paying attention to the body, crucial things in dealing with anxiety. Now, if the anxiety is getting out of hand, then you need to be able to communicate with that anxiety in some way. One of the things that was suggested the last time, of course, was to talk, to give anxiety a name.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes, too, if you're feeling anxious, and this is something people kind of know me for, is to joke about it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
To make fun of it. And that way you reduce the impact of it.
Absolutely. I was just talking with my daughter about that a couple days ago, and there's some things that are coming up between school and dance and church youth group and different things like that, and starting to become a woman and her body going through all those changes. There's a lot of anxious feelings.
Sure.
And so we were laughing and we were talking about, how funny is it that in the movie, I think I referenced it last week, but this movie Inside Out, there's the character Anxiety, and she's this orange kind of funny looking character with this really big stringy hair, and it's just a very funny character. Lots of loud things that she says, and she's all buzzing around like really frantic kind of in a good way in the beginning, but that frantic nature then kind of takes over everybody, and it starts to control and it starts to manipulate what people say. And so we were talking about how in our minds, the less credence we give to those anxious thoughts and those anxious things that are in our lives, and we kind of make fun of them, like you were saying, or, we refuse to give them power, I guess, in another manner of speaking, we thwart that attack from anxiety. Mm-hmm. We address it in the humor, we address it, but in practice, we really diminish it and we don't give it power over us. We acknowledge it, but there's no power there.
Yeah. Well, one of the things we can do too is to write a letter to that anxiety. See, the crucial part for the person is to identify what the anxiety is. What am I so anxious about? Now, for someone who has blindness, there's a whole lot of anxiety, both helpful and not so helpful anxiety, that can come, particularly if you're newly blind. But even if you've been blind for a while, you need to pay attention that some of the anxiety may be exactly what you need to increase your use of your other senses to protect yourself. You don't want to have the anxiety so much that you can't do anything, but but a moderate anxiety when you go out, particularly in the traffic around this town. You gotta have a little bit of anxiety in terms of crossing the street.
Right. Yes.
And paying attention to traffic noises, and you have to be a little hypersensitive.
Yep.
And you also need to, and this was one of the hardest things for me to learn when I was losing my sight, was that somebody would give me some direction to go down, go someplace. And I say, well, I'll be able to find it when I get there.
Yeah.
And then I get there and I said, duh. Lundgren, I needed to kind of predict or go through understanding where something is and what kinds of landmarks I had to look for to find a particular thing. But if you're so used to using your sight, you don't think about it. And that's where, that's where we need to, again, we talk about with blindness, we can do whatever we want to do. We just need to do it differently. And that's one of the differences, that we have to pre-plan what we do to make it more comfortable for us when we're going someplace.
Well, I think you're really talking about reprogramming or repurposing anxiety in and of itself,
right?
Where a lot of times, sometimes you have to live in an anxious state. And we have to also say that all anxiety is not, like, anxiety in and of itself is not necessarily good or bad. We just have associated bad feelings and emotions with anxiety. There's anxiety that can be really good, that will actually keep you alive. It's the same anxiety that singers get, or, public speakers get, or even we get when we hop on a show. I mean, there's this nervous, anxious energy that comes out, and it actually makes your brain process things a lot faster. It gives you the right words to say at the right time. It makes you hyper if you're a musician. I remember playing on stage piano just by myself, a solo piano performance, where I'd be like, I really don't feel prepared. I don't know what's going on. And all of a sudden, the muscle memory and the anxiety kind of helps engage in some of those more nuanced emotions, where now I'm playing this most beautiful thing I've ever played. And I'm just kind of in this almost ethereal state where people will say it was like I had an out-of-body experience and I was watching myself play or do this whatever thing, and I was just in the zone. So there's a good anxious element to this I don't think it can be overlooked.
If I don't have some anxiety before I go on stage to give a presentation or whatever, it's going to be flat. I know it.
Absolutely.
On the other hand, I've had a few instances where I had so much material and I had been working so hard on it that I was over anxious, and it was not that great a presentation. And I say, okay, I've got to moderate that. I've got to, and take a lot of deep breaths, and particularly not study it right before I go on stage, because you always find something. I'm afraid I'll forget that, and guess what? Your over anxiety gets in the way of you doing the way that you want to perform, and that's the name of the game, is to moderate the anxiety, to get some of the anxiety that's helpful, but not overdo it.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's this fine line. I think it's just putting whatever it is that you're doing, that taking that comfortable baseline and then putting something a little bit out of reach. So there's just a tinge of anxiety to keep that, excitement moving, and that's really like just trying to go with the flow, but then being prepared at the same time.
That's right. And trusting.
Kind of like doing this show.
Well, I'm, right before we connected, I was, I could feel my body tightening up, and I had to do some deep breathing to make sure that, I have a suitable level, which I hope I'm at. And I expect my co-therapist to say, Lundgren, simmer down if I need that. But it's very important to have that balance. And another thing that we can do to kind of manage our anxiety is to you mentioned naming it. Giving it even a funny name to kind of reduce its power, but also to write a letter to the anxiety. If it's something that's fairly regular, you might want to write a letter to that anxiety and, kind of lay it out on paper. Because once it's on paper and out of your system, there's something about that transaction where it flows down the pen, and then you find yourself automatically managing it better. At least that's what I've found. And the same thing.
I don't know how many journals I've gone through over the last 4 years, but it's been really interesting to go back and read some of the letters that I've written to myself or things that I was going through. And I was like, wow, what a different person I've become in the last 4 years. And it's a really cool way to track your progress. And another thing that I did was anytime that there's been an emotional event, I'm not going to say necessarily traumatic, but an event of importance, I'll write myself an email and I'll I'll email my future self and I'll say, last year, man, you went through this thing and I'm so proud of you for going through X, Y, and Z. And then you set a future date of delivery. You can set those in your email. And so I send it for exactly 1 year from that particular day.
No kidding.
And so then I'll forget about it, obviously a year later, but that email comes and it's like, oh my goodness, how cool is that my past self knew exactly where I would be a year from now.
Right.
And the things that you've accomplished or done or think that you will do, because something when you're writing to your future self, you are speaking really into existence things that you want to happen.
Right.
And sometimes when we associate anxiety with what we're going through, anxiety is such a in the moment thing, and it's a precursor to what we're about to do.
Right.
Getting married, taking on a new job, going to a vacation, moving across the country, going on a date, doing a podcast, whatever. Anxiety is a future problem in a now situation.
Right.
And being able to write your letter to your future self really takes the anxiety and anxious self out of it and talks to the person, the man, woman that you are in the future, speaking that into existence.
That's a powerful. I didn't know you could do that with a computer, but I'm a little
awesome.
behind in the computer business, which creates lots of anxiety since everything is on the computer, on the smartphone, and so forth. And, which brings up another issue, as procrastination is one of the signals to you about anxiety that we don't pay attention to. But if we're avoiding something, there's anxiety tied up with it. And instead of continuing to avoid it, we have to take a look, what is the procrastination about? Because, we're punished for procrastinating, but nobody asks us, well, how come you're procrastinating? Is it because you're hesitant that you can't do it? Or you don't know how to do it? Or there's something else going on there? Or you kind of angry at me who's given you this charge, but you're not willing to let me know, and so you just simply do passive aggressive, dragging your feet to do whatever I ask you to do. Kids do this a lot.
Oh yeah,
and of course your children don't. But men.
You need to spend some more time with my kids, Bill. I have been begging my kids for 2.5 weeks to clean their room. Is it still done? No.
Yeah.
Not even a little bit. I think they've gotten even more messy.
Right. And so, kind of, say, you have to sit down with them eventually and say, not you're a bad person for procrastinating, but what's the procrastination all about? You're trying to tell me something. And we might not like to hear what they're telling us, but to say, look, this is the reason I give you this assignment, because eventually you're not going to have somebody around to clean up after you. So you need to learn now. That's why. But I can understand it's not as much fun to clean your room as to play in your room. But that's the kind of thing we have to deal with. It's a little different from the anxiety, but it's dealing with the procrastination, because I have to say to myself, my procrastination learning some things about my iPhone is because I'm not sure that I can manage it or learn by myself. I have to find someone to help me. And a lot of people, rather than teaching me, oh, let me do it, and we won't worry about it. And then, of course, my procrastination says, okay, fine, we get it done. But that's not, I've learned, that this is not such a hot idea, especially when the person you rely on is out of the country for 3 months. And then you're not able to do some functions that need to be done in that 3 months when the person is gone. So that's how the anxiety gets in the way of what I need to do for myself. And that's one of the reasons a training center will really insist upon students not asking other people to do things, because we've got to learn. But it's anxiety producing.
Yeah. Well, and I'm thinking, in the few minutes that we have left, I want to ask a very unpopular question that kind of just popped in my head. How much of anxiety is a choice?
Interesting question. What are your
Because
thoughts?
when I think of, when you were talking about procrastination, I think of, the laundry or the dishes. If I procrastinate in doing the laundry or taking it out of the dryer or putting it away, there's 3 times I get to procrastinate.
Yeah.
And if I don't, I get anxious because the laundry piles up. It's clean, but it's piled up in the corner and it's not put away.
Right.
So I am choosing in that moment to do something else, which is causing an anxious reaction.
Right.
I am choosing not to do the dishes because I'm either lazy or I don't want to do it, or
it's boring. It's boring.
It's boring. It's whatever it is.
There's few rewards for doing the dishes.
Very few. However, I found that when my home is as clean and as tidy and put together as it possibly can be, my level of anxiousness and flightiness and overall well-being is so much better controlled. I'm calmer. I'm in a better sense of place. And so I have to choose to do the things that do not cause me anxiety. And so addressing the anxiety head on, I guess, in a manner of speaking, like you were saying, that's where I asked the question, is anxiety a choice?
Well, anxiety is very dependent on the reward. Because if it's a reward of, a tremendous reduction of anxiety is a reward for doing something. But not everything has a high reward factor, or we have to remind ourselves, as you just did, the advantages to you emotionally to have things neat and orderly. And we have trouble sometimes making that connection.
Absolutely. Well, that's a way higher level of higher order thinking than we're used to.
Right.
That's naming that's naming a pre-problem to a solution that may or may not happen. That's so
you got it. You got it. And that's
how do you deal with it?
Yeah, that's why the procrastination in some things is going to be pretty persistent.
Absolutely.
But if we have a reward factor, for example, somebody's coming over and the place is a mess, then we say, oh, the reward is to have the place look better when that person comes over. That pushes us into...
Well, you put the nail right on the head. You nailed that coffin shut, because there's a person in my life, and every time they come over, I want my house to be absolutely pristine, because I don't want to be judged for the way my home looks.
Right, exactly. So then you get past this kind of, as you describe it, laziness. Then there's some anxiety. That, this person is coming over, and you use that anxiety to give you the energy to get past your procrastination to do the job.
And usually I can get my whole home done in about an hour and a half. I mean, everything, because I move fast.
So that's where the pre-planning, you realize, I can do this in an hour and a half. Okay, the person will be here in 2 hours.
That's
I got to get the work done. But that's where procrastination is a learning kind of thing for you. For example, if you if you procrastinate it and the person comes over and you suffer the penalty, then the next time you won't procrastinate because you know the punishment you'll get for it. But we don't have punishments for everything we procrastinate with.
Right. Well, and sometimes those punishments, and this is a whole episode for a whole other topic, but sometimes those punishments are either true or just in our minds. We punish ourselves.
Right. But I want to hop very quickly to another thing, and that is the phobias, because I think that's an important issue for a lot of people, including social phobia. And one of the things that we've learned over the years that with phobia, for example, if you have a phobia of spiders or snakes or something like that, one way you can do it, and I think of that one of the films of Harrison Ford.
Indiana Jones, where he gets trapped into the snake pit in the train car.
That is one way to deal with your phobia about snakes.
Just dive head first in there. Right.
If you don't have a heart attack.
Right.
But the other way is to start off with a picture of snakes or the thing that you're phobic about and get used to that and then move up to a stuffed snake, for example. In other words, gradually increase the closeness to the object of your phobia so that you get more and more used to it. And that's why when I talked about social phobia, one of the things is for people to maybe go to a party they normally wouldn't go to, but stay for a short time. And just each time there's something available like that to increase the time so you realize, oh, I can do this. And there's also at the same time with that kind of social phobia, there are lots of messages that you give yourself that no one in the world would give you, but you do it to yourself. And it's helpful for you to identify what those messages, for example, if I go to this party, everybody in the party is going to turn their back on me. Well, when you articulate that, you say, that's a little silly. And that's all or nothing thinking. And that's the same for depression, all or nothing thinking. Irrational thoughts that we give ourselves that increase anxiety or increase depression and makes it difficult for us to function. But it's really our messaging, and that we need to kind of stop giving ourselves. We need to recognize the messages that our anxiety is giving us, and then to look at it. Okay, this is an irrational thought. What's a rational thought? And, maybe some people won't want to talk to me because they're uncomfortable because of my being blind. But that's their problem. That's not mine. There will be people who want to talk to me. And it's that's a more rational thing. And I don't have to avoid a party just because one person might be negative. I have all these other people that I'll get to know if I go to this party or this gathering or whatever it is. But it's putting the phobia into perspective for you.
That's right.
That takes work, and that takes sitting down and just taking a look at Mr. Anxiety and what the anxiety is telling you about where your head is.
That's right.
And be able to negotiate and say, okay, I know this is very scary for me, so I'm just going to go for a short period of time. And then when I start to feel uncomfortable, I'll leave.
Right.
And I do the same thing, by the way, for people who are recovering from alcoholism and have a business party or whatever where there's drinking. That's a must that I give, that if you start to feel anxious about being around alcohol, if you and your partner are going to the party, you go in separate cars so that your partner can stay if he or she wants to, but you can hop on the car as soon as it starts to feel uncomfortable and go home or go, someplace safe. but it's that kind of gradual thing in dealing with a phobia.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, as we wrap up this show, I just want to say to all of our listeners that we're so thankful that you listen to this show, because there's a lot of heavy topics that we cover. And we can go kind of into the weeds and kind of go all over, but really the heart behind what we talk about is to make sure that people are bettering themselves, they're bettering their families, they're bettering their communities, and living a much more enriched life. And so I want to thank everybody for listening. And if you have any questions, please give us a call, 720-712-8856, or you can email us, and those emails come directly to me. And so if you have a question for Bill, feedback@aftersight.org. I'll kind of leave everybody with this. When addressing anxiety and understanding what it is and how it affects you, please ask the question, why, what, who, how, all of these questions in dealing with anxiety. Most of the time, you'll get your answer pretty quick in the identifier, and then you can move forward from that. Bill, what do you got?
I want to remind people that, okay, we've talked about things that we can do, but sometimes some experiences, anxiety, are more difficult than we can that we need to handle by ourselves. That's why a professional can be very helpful. You're not going into psychoanalysis for 99 years, but to work on what the anxiety is, the medication may be appropriate. There are all kinds of ways that we haven't even touched on to help you. So I would encourage people not to be afraid. To seek that kind of outside help, because getting outside help gives you a perspective that you may have difficulty to give yourself, and your family may have difficulty giving to you. So going to an outside person who you learn to trust can be very beneficial.
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is Blindsight, another episode. Look forward to meeting with you again. More to discuss. Take care. Have a great week.